你们好.谢谢你. Thank you for being here. I promise you this is going to be a great evening. I understand that people in Singapore are some of the smartest people in the world. Is that true? Did anyone not understand the question? Well, that means you can take a lot of information in a short period of time. Is that right? Say yes. Yes. So I'm going to give you a lot of good ideas very fast, like dealing cards. Okay? Now, I came to Singapore first in 1968. In 1968, you've seen the old parts of Singapore? All of Singapore was the old parts. I came back again in 1989. I was here in 1968, 69, 1970. I was away for many years. I came back in 89, and Singapore was suddenly the best run country in the world. Cleanest city, best run country in the world. In half a generation, you beat everybody, and now you beat the United States in gross national product per person. Is that right? When are you going to stop? Where else can you go from here? I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you. Everywhere I go, I talk about Singapore. I love this country. If I wasn't living in the United States, where the climate is nice, I would love to live in Singapore. This is a beautiful place. What you've created here is a triumph of the human mind, because Singapore has been built on mind power, not manpower. Singapore has been built with brains and ability and talent and drive and vision and determination. It is really an incredible place. It's really an incredible place, and so I congratulate you, and I tell you I'm very happy to be here. And I'm very happy to be able to share some ideas that may help you move even faster forward. Now, I have some good news for you, and I have more good news, and only good news tonight. The good news is that we are living in the very best time in all of human history. The stock markets may be going up and down. The American stock market is simply overpriced. You know, the stocks are too high, because during the 90s everybody went crazy, and now they're still a little crazy, and the prices will have to come down until they stop being crazy. A stock is merely an investment to get a return. That's all it is, and the returns aren't there, so the stocks have lower value, and when the stocks go down to the level of the return, it will stabilize and life will go on. But the good news is that we have no major wars. Most of the major diseases have been solved, have been cured, and that we have entered into basically a free market world. And Singapore is perfectly positioned to be one of the most prosperous nations for as far as we can see for 100 years. And the opportunities for you have never been greater in all of human history than now, except for tomorrow and next year and the year after. I have lived and worked and traveled in almost 90 countries. And I can tell you there's a lot of crummy countries out there. There's a lot of countries that you only want to go to once, or you want to get through quickly. And 100 years from now, they will still be poor. But Singapore will be more prosperous and more prosperous and more prosperous. So your job is to participate fully in the prosperity of the future, right? How many people here would like to double their income? If I could show you how to double your income, will you give it a try? Now, I've studied this subject for my entire life. I have trained over 2 million people, and I have created probably thousands of people who've gone from absolutely nothing to becoming millionaires, including in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, not Laos, but Indonesia, I'm sorry about Indonesia, the Philippines, Hong Kong, much of Latin America. My programs are distributed in 20 languages in 35 countries, and tens of thousands of people have been through the programs, and many have dramatically changed their lives with the tools and the ideas that I'm going to give to you. Now, we have 3 hours together, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the very best ideas that I know, and I'm going to condense them into our 3 hours, okay? And I'm going to give you, in the first half, I'm going to talk about what I call the psychology of success. We can call it the psychology of selling, because it's the psychology or the mental way of achieving anything. In the second half, I'm going to show you how to apply this specifically to how to sell more, how to double your sales, how to double your income, and so on, okay? Is that a good deal? Say yes. In the middle, we'll have a break. All right? Okay. Now, I started off my life poorly. I did not graduate from high school. I finished in the half of the class that made the top half possible. I couldn't get any kind of a job, so I worked at laboring jobs. My first job was washing dishes in the back of a hotel, small hotel. And then I went to washing cars with a car lot. And then I went to washing floors with a janitorial service. I thought washing was in my future, but it was sort of downhill, washing. And then I worked as a construction laborer. And then I worked on farms, and I worked on ranches, and I worked on a ship in the North Atlantic. And I worked at laboring jobs until I was about 22, 23. And how many people here are in sales? Well, when I couldn't get a job, laboring job, I got into sales too, just like you. So I know where you're coming from. And actually, I started my sales career here in Southeast Asia. I used to sell here on the streets of Singapore. I used to work traveling from city to city around Southeast Asia selling. So I know what it's like to sell here in Singapore on these streets in the summertime when it's hot. It's hot, hotter, and hotter still. It's never cool. You pray for rain, all right? I know what it's like. I used to be drenched, and that's before you got out of the house, you know. So I went and I worked very hard. I wasn't afraid to work because I'd worked as a laborer. And so I was told that if you just see enough people, talk to enough people, you'll make sales. So I used to run from place to place so I could be rejected more often. And I wasn't making any sales. And all I knew to do was to see as many people as possible and talk as much as possible. So it was run, run, talk, talk. Run, run, talk, talk, and then no, no. And I used to run from place to place, and I would talk as much as possible, and people would say no. I didn't mind if they looked at their watches, but it's when they looked at their watches and started hitting their watches like So finally I did something which changed my life, and it brings us to being together tonight. I went and asked a top salesman, I said, what are you doing differently from me? How come you're making so many sales? He's selling the same product. He's selling it out of the same office. He's selling to the same people. He's selling it at the same price. And he's selling 5 times and 10 times as much as me. And I didn't know much about selling at that time. And he said, well, show me your presentation. And I said, my what? Your sales presentation. I said, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. And so he said, well, a presentation is a logical and orderly method of separating prospects from suspects, identifying their needs, making a presentation, asking their questions, and getting them to take action. I couldn't believe it. It's like I had been pushing a telephone, you know, trying to get through, and I was just pushing numbers randomly, and nobody was answering. All right? I wasn't getting through, and he told me there's a logical sequence to selling, which we'll talk about in a little while. Well, instead of talking all the time, I went out and I began asking questions, and people responded to me differently. And then I began to craft and design questions, and people responded to me differently, and I started to make sales. And then I asked him other questions. Well, what do you say when someone says this? And how do you deal with this objection? And how do you get them to take action when they want to think it over? And, well, all the answers have been found. All the answers to all our questions have been found, and I took answers from him, and I began to ask other people, and then I began to read books on selling. I didn't know there were any books on selling. You know there's over 4,000 books on selling? There's 2 books on selling published every week, 2 main books and probably 5 other books. And you know that most salespeople have never read a book on selling? I couldn't believe it. I went down to the bookstore and there were books on selling. So I began to buy them, and I would get up every morning and I would read for an hour in selling, and I'd take notes and I'd think of how I could use this, and I'd go out and I'd try it out that day. And that night I'd review how did it work. And if it worked well, then I would do more of it. If it didn't work well, I would stop it or modify it, or sometimes I'd combine this idea with one idea and I had something that worked even better. And then I began to listen to audio programs on selling. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I had no idea there was so much good information on audio programs. Do you know how many people who have become rich just listening to audio programs in their car when they drive around or when they walk around? Those days, I didn't have a car, but I had one of those Sony cassette players that you carried around your neck like a purse, and it had a little earphone, and I'd go around like this, listening to it like this. And I'd get up in the morning and I'd play it. And I played it, and I memorized. I spent hours. I memorized the words. Interesting thing, my programs here, this program, Psychology of Selling, is the best-selling audio program on sales in the world. More people have become millionaires listening to it than any other program, according to some of the studies, follow-up studies. People tell me they listen to that program over and over again until they remember all the words. And then when they're with a customer, when the customer says something, the words just fall out. And they tell me, I made the sale because I remembered the words. The words had been stored away. They're part of your thinking. Just like your language. You speak a language, you don't have to grasp for a word because the word's programmed in. The correct answers are programmed in. Well, I listened to programs, this is long before I ever produced my own programs, and I remembered the words, and my sales went up and up and up, and my sales kept going up, and soon I began to go to seminars and courses. I began to travel great distances to go to seminars and sit in front and learn from other people and practice what they learned. Now let me give you an interesting point. Successful people have been studied at great length for many years, and their behaviors have been observed. What do successful people do that's different from other people? One of the things that we find is that successful people, all of them, are very action-oriented. In other words, if they get an idea, they move quickly on it. If they learn something new, they try it out. Now people say, well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, find out quickly. There's a rule that says try quickly and fail fast. Because the only two things can happen if you take action on a new idea. What are they? What are the two things? It's not a trick question. I'll tell you if it's a trick question. It's not a trick question. Well, it can work, and if it works, it tells you do more of that. Or if it doesn't work, it gives you feedback, and you either stop doing it or you modify it until it does work. But the wonderful thing is that you can't lose by trying something new. So if you were to take successful people, and there's many studies that have been done on this, if you could only look at them through a window and look at a group of people, look through the window, you could tell who the successful people are because they're always in motion. They're always trying more things. They're always active. Unsuccessful people are always waiting for everything to be just right. It's like waiting for a bus on a street where no buses go. They're still waiting. Where's the bus? The bus never comes. Successful people are always taking action. So if all you do is just take more action, just get busier, you'll be more successful. By the way, I'm not going to talk about it today, but does everybody here want to be lucky? Would you like to be lucky? Say yes. Okay. You know, it's a very, very important part of Chinese culture is luck, good fortune. Isn't that true? That's why we like jade. Why do we like jade? Because jade signifies luck. Okay. Now, I studied this for many years, and what I found is that it's not luck, it's what we call the law of probabilities. The law of probabilities says that if you flip a coin, the probabilities are 50% it will come down heads or tails, okay? The law of probability says that if you drive home, there's a certain probability that everything will happen. If you drive home, there's a very high probability you'll be safe, but there's a small probability you'll have an accident. In life, when you get married, there's a probability you'll be successful and happy. There's a probability that you won't. All life insurance, all insurance is based on probabilities. It's based on statistics, okay? So, how do you make your own luck? The way you make your own luck is you try more things. It's very simple. It's like life is a great game of darts, okay? Now, if you only throw one dart at the board, your chances of hitting a bullseye are very, very small because of the law of probabilities. But if you throw dart after dart after dart after dart after dart at the board, what must you eventually do? First of all, even if you're an idiot, you'll eventually hit the board. And if you keep throwing darts, and you keep throwing darts one after another, even if you're an idiot, you will sooner or later hit a bullseye. Isn't that true? So you look at successful people, and one of the things we find about successful people is that they're just average people who try more things. They just try more things. They're more active. They make more calls. In selling, we make more calls. And in life, we just try more things. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you throw darts, how many times will you miss the bullseye? Most of the time. Most of the things you try won't work. The fact is that successful people fail far more than unsuccessful people. In other words, if you throw lots of darts, you're going to miss most of the time. But you don't focus on the misses. As a matter of fact, here's a rule. If you could throw 10 darts and be absolutely guaranteed that 9 would fail, try 9 different things in life, make 9 calls, and be absolutely guaranteed that 9 out of 10 calls that you make, 90%, would fail completely, but 1 would be a big hit. If you could be guaranteed of a 90% failure rate with a 1% success rate, what would that mean? It means you'd be one of the most successful people alive. Isn't that true? Because then all you have to do is say, whoa, let's start, because, in other words, increase the probabilities. And then people say, boy, you're sure lucky. No, I'm not lucky. I just saw more people. I just tried more things. Now, every time you learn something new, it's like throwing another dart. Every time you read a book, listen to a tape, come to a course like this, it's like adding more darts to your bag, so you have more darts to throw. And so an average person who's got more darts to throw will be more successful than a genius who's got very few darts to throw. So it's really important. Well, and I'm getting off the track, but you can make your own luck by simply throwing more darts, by trying more things, by doing what you're doing tonight, by coming here. And my job is to give you a whole bunch of darts, okay? Because the law is that if you try enough things, you will be a big success. If you try enough things, because human beings are learning organisms. In other words, we're always learning from our experiences. We're learning at a conscious level and even at an unconscious level. But you cannot help but learn. You're just learning all the time. So even if you're trying things and you're failing, you're still learning at a very fast rate. In fact, you learn more and faster from failure than from anything else. Nobody really learns much from success. But from failure, you get real smart. Like burning your hand. you learn very fast. Okay, there's a story I have to tell you. It's up in Montana, in California, in the United States. In Montana, they raise a lot of sheep in Montana. And this fellow has a sheep ranch that he got from his father. And the city starts to expand out, and they buy out his sheep ranch to build houses. So he sells the land, and he makes a big profit. And he decides that he'll go down to Los Angeles, which is a long way. It's like going from here to Bangkok. He'll go down to Los Angeles. He'll go to the big city. He's never been to the big city before in his whole life, but he wants to go to the big city and see it now that he has all this money. He's always been on this farm raising sheep. Well, he buys a plane ticket, gets onto the plane, he's sitting there, and he's sitting next to a businessman. The businessman's working away. He's got a computer working away, and he feels a little bit awkward because he's just a farm boy. And this businessman's working away, and he's kind of crossing his legs like this, and he crosses his legs, and he notices there's 2 sheep turds in his cuff. And he goes, and he reaches down, and he picks them up. He's got them in his hand like this, and he doesn't know what to do. He feels kind of embarrassed, and he's looking around, and the businessman says, "What do you got?" He says, "What?" He said, "What do you got in your hand?" He said, "Nothing." He said, "Come on, what do you got?" He said, "Well, they're pills." He said, "Well, what kind of pills are they?" He said, "Well, they're smarten up pills." He said, "Smarten up pills." He said, "Yes, I'm going to Los Angeles for a big business meeting, and I always take a couple of smarten up pills with me, so I'm really smart when I go to my meeting." The guy says, "Well, I'm going to a big meeting, and I need something like that too. Give me one of those pills." And he said, "Well, I don't think you'd like it." He said, No, come on, you got 2 of them. Give me one. I really need it. I've got a big meeting coming up." He said, "Well, all right." So he gives him one, about this big. Guy takes it, goes. He said, "That tastes like a sheep turd." He said, "See, you're getting smarter already." Well, our goal today is for you to get smarter throughout the day. Anyway, so I began asking these questions. Why are some people more successful than others? And let me make sure we get this. Okay. And what I learned was the law of cause and effect. Now, the law of cause and effect is the great law of life. It basically says that there's a reason for everything. Everything happens for a reason. That success is not an accident. Failure is not an accident. If you want to be successful, happy, financially independent, if you want to achieve all your goals, it's not luck. It's not an accident. What you do is you find someone else who at one time did not have the effect that you want. You decide what you want. You find someone else who didn't have it, and you find out what they did to get it, and you do it over and over again until you get the same result. And it's not an accident. Well, when I learned this, it changed my life. You mean if I do what other successful people do, I'll get the same results that other successful people get? The answer is yes. You mean if I find out what top salespeople do, and I do the same thing until I master it, I'll get the same results as top salespeople? I'll make the same money? I'll have the same cars? Yes. So I went out and I did it, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. And I'm not as good a salesperson as many people here. Many people here are better salespeople than me, but I learned the cause and effect relationships. I learned that selling is like cooking. There's recipes for selling. There's formulas. And if you follow them, and by the way, they spent $20-30 million in the last few years videotaping 55,000 sales calls and watching the calls and reviewing the videotapes and having people sit in the back taking notes. And they interviewed the salespeople before the sales call and afterwards, and they interviewed the customers before the sales call and afterwards. And if the customer decided to buy, they asked them, and they played the video, at what point did you decide to buy? If the customer decided not to buy, they asked, why did you decide not to buy? And they did this with 55,000 calls, and they began to draw cross correlations, and they found that every sale follows an exact process, and it follows an exact process in the customer's mind. And that if you sell the way the customers buy, you'll sell 5 and 10 times as much as you sell today. The reason that we don't sell is because we sell differently from the way the customer buys. It's the same as if I was to speak to you in German or you were to speak to me in Chinese. I mean, it would be like using a different language that we don't understand. So what I found was that if you do what other successful salespeople do, based on the exhaustive research, your sales go up. And I tried it, and sales went up. And you could take people, I took people off the street who'd never sold anything in their lives, and I said, here's the system. And these are sometimes the very best salespeople of all, because they don't have any ideas or fixed ideas. So I said, just do it this way. Say these words, do it this way, say these words, do it this way. And they did, and their sales went like that. And they went past people who'd been selling for 5 and 10 years. I cannot tell you how many young people, guys out of school, women out of school, just starting in sales, never sold before, began to use these methods and became superstars in their fields. Because they didn't have any old ideas about the way things were supposed to be done. They just said, okay, they just did it that way. And their sales, and people said, well, you're just lucky. You're just lucky. You just got into it at the right time. I had a woman in my course who was really neat. She came to me a year and a half later. She came back to the seminar I was at. She said, you're not going to believe it. I was in your seminar 18 months ago, and I had just started in real estate, and you said to set goals for how much you want to earn. So I set a goal to make $100,000 in the next year. Well, I didn't know that the average first-year earning for a real estate person was $18,000. Nobody told me that. So I set a goal of $100,000. Then I just did what you said to do, and I made $104,000 in my first year and became #1 in the company. And they said, how did you do that? I said, well, do what? Make so much money. Well, is that a lot of money? She didn't know that was a lot of money for a first year. She had just written it down, and then she just did what other successful people did. So the law of cause and effect is what changed my life. And by the way, I've been in many different businesses now. I've consulted for more than 500 companies over the years, over the last 20 years. And in every case, I ask them, how does your business work? What are the cause and effect relationships? And where's it strong? Where's it weak? What's working? What's not working? Where are the places where we can gain advantage? Where are the places where we're losing money, and so on? And they think it's miraculous when I come in with this advice, which I charge them a lot of money for. Okay, so what I learned was this, is that there is a mental application. By the way, of all physical laws, there's mental applications. This is more important than anything else. It's that thoughts are causes. Thoughts are causes, and conditions are effects. Thoughts are causes. Oops. Thoughts are causes, and conditions are effects. That means your thoughts create the effects of your life. Is that your thought is creative. You're almost like a magician in your own life. You create your world by the way you think. And the interesting thing is, it's not the way you thought yesterday or the way you might think tomorrow. It's the way you think at this minute, at this moment. It's the way you think in the now that determines your life. And your thoughts are constantly creating your world on a forward basis. The wonderful thing about our society, a free society like Singapore, is that at any given time you can draw a line under the past and you can say, that was the past, but this is how I'm going to think in the future. And your whole life, just like turning the wheel of a car, goes in a different direction. If you change your thinking, you change your life. And when I learned this, you mean your outer world merely reflects your thoughts? Your outer world is merely an image of your inner world? Is that you keep attracting into your life people and circumstances in harmony with your thinking? Is that everything you have in your life you've created by the way you think? And that if you don't like anything, you can change the way you think and attract something different? Yes. All of that's possible. And once you learn that, you realize there's only one thing in the universe over which you have complete control. What is that? You only control one thing in the world. What is it? You can control your thinking. You can't control other things. You can't control the traffic, and you certainly can't control the weather, but you can control your thinking. And that's enough. Because if you will control your thinking, you control the whole world. Singapore is a tribute to human thinking. Singapore is merely an external expression of the very best thinking that has gone into building this country. This country is based on mind power. It's the most amazing thing. Look at these beautiful hotels and convention centers and office buildings. I mean, these are mental. These were mental before they were physical. Are you with me so far? It's really important to understand that. It's kind of an overwhelming thought. I had a hard time with it when I was in my early 20s. You mean my life, which was not that great, has been created by myself? Yes, it's been created by myself. So I said, well, then I'm going to start to get my thinking in harmony with what I want rather than keep thinking the old crummy thoughts.